Would you have picked this French Provincial dresser up off the curbside? Today, I have a trashy treasure makeover for you, and I can't wait to share how this French Provincial dresser all turned out. Just let me get set up, and I'll be right back. Let's start. Here's the fun part. As I was driving home, I spotted this French Provincial curbside, and even though it looked like a hot mess on the outside, it's a solid wood piece and it's structurally sound. So once I had it home and brought it down to my paint room, it was time to give it a really good cleaning. I masked up, mixed some white lightning powder with water into a spray bottle, and then using an automotive sponge, started cleaning this piece. I'm always amazed at what a good cleaning does, because as I started rubbing the crud off the front of this dresser, it started looking beautiful. To get into all the grooves, I took my dollar store brush and I sprayed the cleaner into the grooves and gave it a really good scrubbing. Once I finished with the outside of the dresser and the top, it was time to start on the inside of the drawers. The drawers were in pristine condition, so once they were all cleaned up, they looked perfect. Once I had the inside and the outside perfectly clean, I left it overnight for this dresser to dry. The next morning I came down, and rather than use an orbital sander or palm sander to sand this piece, I decided to hand sand it. And using dollar store sandpaper, which I do not recommend, I actually had some 120 grit dollar store sandpaper on hand and just thought I would finish it off as not to be wasteful. But really, go for the brand name. Don't bother with the dollar store stuff, and I'll show you why in a moment. Anyways, I took a sheet of the dollar store sandpaper and I quartered it by using my painter's tool. This painter's tool has numerous applications to it, and cutting sandpaper with the sharp edge is just one of them. It's just so simple to do. Scuff sanding the entire piece, this entire French Provincial dresser, took me about 10 minutes in total. And all I did was I took that 120 grit sandpaper and I went ahead and gave it a scuffing all over the drawers, including the hardware, because I planned on leaving the original hardware in place and painting over it. As you can see, the dollar store sandpaper does an adequate job. However, it starts falling apart. You can see that it's tearing here, and it doesn't last quite as long as brand name sandpaper. So if you have the opportunity to get your sandpaper from Lowe's or Home Depot or a hardware store, etc., rather than a dollar store, I do suggest spending the extra couple of dollars and getting a brand name. In the long run, it will save you money because this sandpaper lasts much longer. Once I scuff sanded a drawer, I would take the brush off all the dust, and then move on to the next drawer. Again, I'm just giving this a hand scuff sand. I'm not trying to remove any of the finish. I'm just trying to scuff it up so it gives the paint something to cling on to. I spent a little extra time around the French Provincial hardware as it has a lot of detail. So I wanted to get underneath and give the actual hardware a little scuff sanding as well, as I knew I was going to paint this hardware out. Once the drawers were all finished, it was time to roll in the body of this piece to give it a scuff sanding as well. To get into the lip and the grooves of this French Provincial piece, I folded the sanding paper in half, and then I went into the details to give that a sanding. Now for the fun part. I chose to paint this French Provincial Dresser in a color called Nautical, and it's from the Silk All-in-One paint line by Dixie Belle, so the primer and the top coat is included. This paint self-levels really nicely, and there's about a 5-minute working time when you're brushing it on. To get into all the details for this hardware, I pounced the brush up and down just to make sure that I got the paint into all the crevices, and also went underneath the actual handle to make sure the underneath was painted fully as well. I suggest using a good quality paintbrush to do this, because if you're going to use a cheapo brush, with the pouncing, it's not going to hold up very well. With a good quality paintbrush, you're going to have no issues whatsoever. So you just pounce to get the paint into all the crevices, and then you'll smooth the paint out by brushing back and forth afterwards. I have to say, painting with this Nautical Blue was so much fun. It's such a beautiful color to work with. Once I had all the drawers painted, I went on and started on the body. To keep the edges clean, rather than taping them off, what I like to do is just go in and brush them on an angle. So I add some paint to it, and then as you'll notice, I brush up, but I'm attacking those edges on an angle, not straight up and down. And this way it keeps the edges very, very clean. Once I had all the edges done, it was time for the base of the body. And again, whenever I was painting near an edge, I made sure to use my paintbrush on an angle to keep that inside edge clean. For the large sides of this French Provincial Dresser, what I did was work fairly quickly. I applied a good amount of paint onto the sides, not so much worrying about smoothing it out until the very end. Again, this paint self-levels really beautifully, so it's such a pleasure to work with. And once all the paint is applied, then I go back and smooth everything out from top to bottom, so it's a perfectly smooth finish. Once I had the front and the sides totally completely painted, it was time to move on to the top. I let the dresser dry overnight, and I came back the next morning to add some drawer detail. And for this, I used one of my favorite transfers, Embroidered Lotus. And I just love the colors and the florals on this. If you've never used a transfer before, they're very easy to apply. You just remove the design from the back sheet. You place it onto your piece, in this case, on the side of my drawer. Then using the stick or the rub-on stick that's provided in the tube, you just rub the transfer design on. Actually, I have a full YouTube video tutorial on how to rub on transfers that I'll include up in the cards above and also in the description down below. Then once you've finished rubbing on the transfer, you pull up the plastic sheet once it's adhered, and then you can burnish it on just to get rid of those ghosting lines around the edges. I didn't bother with the burnishing on this because the side drawers, they're not noticeable at all. But sometimes when you apply a transfer over a painted surface, burnishing is very beneficial. So let's see how this all came together. Just as a reminder, here's the before. And here's the after. And I love it. I think the monochromatic look with the hardware and the French Provincial Dresser all being the same color makes it look much more modern and sophisticated. And especially with the drawer detail on the side, I tell you, I'm loving the way this dresser turned out. Now, I did say on my blog on Tuesday that I'm curious how this dresser would look totally in a wood finish, because this is a wood dresser. So if you'd like to see this dresser two different styles, let me know in the comment down below, because I'm very curious. And the great thing about wood pieces is they can be restyled and refinished over and over again and look fabulous in many different ways. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you've gained any value from this video, please give it a like, a thumbs up, and feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also find me over at salvagedinspirations.com, where I have over 500 furniture painting tutorials teaching you how to make your furniture beautiful. Until next time, I hope you have a fabulous week, and I'll see you again soon. Bye, guys.